Okay, so we talked about the tools in my last video. So today I want to talk about adjustments, filters, and then blending modes for the different layers. So you can find the blending mode right here by clicking on the ellipsis. So let's start with this particular background. We've seen this before, and I'm just going to kind of illustrate how blending modes and filters and all that work. Now, I'm not going to get too fancy with this. I'm just going to duplicate this 2 or 3 times here. So I'm right clicking on it and duplicating it, or you can click here and duplicate. Also, I'm going to name them just 2 and 3 just to so I'll know what is what and can keep organized a little bit better. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Also, remember I unlocked this first layer so I could actually edit it. So I'm going to show you the power of blending modes and filters, but they're really dependent on layers. So keep in mind that a lot of images that you see out in the world that are done by professionals might have hundreds of layers to the file. And this combining all of these layers is really where you start seeing results. And so if I do like, this is the second layer. So if I start doing blending modes on this layer, look, it's kind of, whoops, well, for one, it's not the top layer. So that was probably a bad idea. All right. So if I do a blending mode on this this last layer, you can see some minor details with some. But with some, you might not even hardly notice too much. Like exclusion, you're going to notice because it inverts images and so on and so forth. But you might not notice any major differences. And then none, of course, means that there are no there's no blending mode or anything changed on it. But when you start, I'm going to go to the second layer now. I'm going to leave the first one alone and just original. But if you go and you start doing these, start playing around with some of these adjustments, let's just let's hide them temporarily. And you start playing around with the vibrance and stuff. You can see how it's changing vibrancy. If you hold down here, you can see the changes. That changes the vibrancy of the image. This deals with the hue and the saturation. The temperature kind of makes it hotter or colder. Changes the tint from like the of the image. Generally speaking, warmer images look better. Not always, but so you go around and play around with some of these. Posterize is an effect, really. If you see, what it does, it just kind of flattens it, gives it kind of a poster effect. So again, you could hold down here and see what's happening. So you play around with these individual layers. I'm going to hide that one now. I want to show this one now. Let's go to filters at this point. So maybe you want a mosaic pattern. This is pretty extreme. How you can kind of dial it in the way that you want it to look. Pixelate's kind of like mosaic, but it is more pixel based. So you all are familiar probably with what pixelization is. So you just play around with these different effects. But you see that if you have it like this, you're always going to see the top layer. So that's where these blending modes and transparency, this transparency comes into play. So like for the third layer, let's overlay it. And then we can kind of dial in how much we want that to show. Actually, I kind of like that it shows a good bit. But with multiply, see how much it darkens it. You need to kind of dial it back a little bit. So just play around with these different blending modes and these filters. I think I'm actually going to make that overlay. I liked the overlay a lot better. It looked better. Or what did I do? I can't remember what I did. I'm going to dial it back a little bit. Now on 2 here, let's use another blending mode. Let's just lighten it because it's getting kind of dark. Screen also generally lightens it as well. So you can just play around with these different effects until you get results that you like. And also there's tools that you can use, colors that you can change. There's lots of things that you can play around with. And then when you add this layer, it of course does even more. So let's actually give this a blending mode as well. All right, so that just shows you a little bit about adjustments, filters, and blending modes. Another thing that I wanted to show you here was I have this image here, and I'm going to unlock this layer. So I have 2 images. I have a zebra and a kangaroo. I'm going to show you how blending modes work in other ways as well. So like I said, the skyline was a little more subtle. But watch this blending mode right here. So there's a few blending modes that will actually, because this is a pattern and black and white, so maybe you can find some patterns out on the web that you want to incorporate that can help tie and unify things together, some of your creations. But look at when I do that. I use multiply or screen even kind of does a similar thing, and overlay also has a similar effect. But what you can do with this is, see, I'm going to use this pattern, and I chose this zebra. I'm just scrolling out with my middle mouse button. I chose this zebra because they're kind of oriented the same way, so I can use his pattern effectively pretty easily with this kangaroo. And then, so we're going to take that, we're going to leave it like that, and we're going to bring back the transparency just a little bit so you can kind of see through it. And then I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to erase everything on that top layer except for the pattern over the kangaroo, and it'll look like so I'm getting my brush, I'm changing the size and the opacity. Let's see what size it is. It needs to be a good bit bigger, so let's double it. And the softness is fine. I don't want it to be super, I actually want it to be a little larger. I don't want it to be super hard, a hard brush, because we want to feather it in a little bit. We don't want it to be too extreme. Like right here, you might want to feather this in. Might even want it feathered a little bit more, so you might even want it softer, right? So you can kind of feather that in to where it looks more realistic. All right, I did go overboard, didn't I? Okay, so anyway, so you can kind of see how you can get some pretty cool effects with pretty easily. So patterns, blending modes, filters, adjustments. That shows you how you can put all those together and get some pretty interesting results.